Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight, we're going to continue our seasonal recaps of the fifth and sixth season tonight. But before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct, and as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are great, we are awesome, we're a good time. And this whole review is is definitely not kind of, but a lead up to our grand breakdown of season seven, probably the most important season of not just this show, but also to the franchise and what it means for things that came into Trek afterwards. Now, granted, there isn't a whole lot that went after the Dominion War because everybody decides that prequels are the way to go for some strange reason. But with the way that Trek seems to be going, there's need to be a need to pay attention to this stuff. So we're going to get into all that, of course, as we get into season seven. But before we do, we'd like to do this kind of recap here. But of course, before we get into all of those things, I'd like to give ourselves our weekly check-in. So David, how have you been?
Very good. Just got back yesterday from almost a week long trip to visit family. All of us here in Texas went up to Virginia, where most of our family comes from and where most of our family still lives, and had a nice vacation out there. We rented an Airbnb, so we had our own house, and then most of the family actually came to our house that we were renting. But we did visit both sides of the family. We were in the mountains, and so we'd go to one side of the mountains for one side of the family, and then the other side of the mountains for the other side. So fun little detail there. But yeah, it was great because we got to have pictures taken of everyone during Thanksgiving meal, and then the next day we actually had more family members show up, so we had nice big family group photos taken on both days. The best part of the one that was taken Thanksgiving Day is my 4-year-old niece, for whatever reason, was upset that she was being made to take a picture. So she has the cutest little frowny face that you've ever seen, crossing her arms and frowning in the middle of all of us smiling and having a nice picture taken. It's the cutest face you've ever seen. So we had a fun
She
time.
just didn't want to be in the picture.
She, how kids are. They were doing something else. They didn't want to be bothered to for what taken away from what they were doing to come do
Right.
this. So she's got a little bit of attitude in the picture, and it's the cutest little face you've ever seen. Because when 4-year-olds get a little temper tantrum, man,
Yeah.
they can have a little temper tantrum. So. Yeah, great weekend. Gave me a lot of time to read The Count of Monte Cristo. I'm still not at the halfway point because that thing is so thick. But
Well, don't
yeah,
rush it.
yeah,
Enjoy it.
well, for sure. But yeah, I'm at the point. I mean, not to give a whole lot of spoilers, but for those
Spoilers.
who
It's
haven't
like a
read it,
200-year-old book. It's
yeah,
not much of a spoiler there.
yeah. But the one of the servants of the Count of Monte Cristo tells a 3-chapter long flashback, which includes the what happened to the character Catterhouse. I don't know how you say his name, Catterhouse. Um,
I'd have to see it.
he's the one who, during the opening bit, of the four men that screw Edmund Dantes over, he's the one who objects. He knows what happened. He's the one who's like, "Oh, I'm not happy about that." But he was also the one who was greedy for money, and so the count came to him
Hmm.
pretending to be a friar, trying to figure out what happened, and he tells the friar what happened to Danglars and to Edmund or to Mercedes, and he tells what happened. And as a thank you, the friar gives a very rich diamond, a very very a massive diamond as a thank you, and that basically sets Catterhouse on a very murderous. He ends up killing somebody in the process of what he does with that jewel, and ruins him. So it's a perfect example of what's going to happen throughout the rest of the book of Edmond Dantes as the Count setting people up to ruin themselves. So yeah,
It's and even though this is not the show for that, it's things like that are why that book to me will always be such a classic, and it's amazes me that there haven't been more movies, TV shows, or whatever that have covered this topic, or like a Count of Monte Cristo TV show. I know
Yeah,
they've done a couple of movies, but nothing very detailed like that story is not in the movie at all. And it's
nope.
in neither of the movies, as a matter of fact. But yeah, like stuff like that would just, I think it would make for such great television, great drama,
Yeah,
and um, it's skipped over time and time again. And then you go and you read it, and it's like you said, it's so long, but it's so involved, it's so detailed. It could almost be its own standalone story.
yeah,
Helps to tie into the greater theme of the rest of the book,
right.
which makes the whole book better.
Yeah,
It's also one of those things that makes me feel like, man, as much as I have aspirations of writing and novelization and everything else, I could never be on that level because it doesn't occur to me to write that way. That's like a side story that yeah,
well,
would
actually, if you think about it, so the Count of Monte Cristo, like Dickens and other writers at the time, they were writing what is effectively, we didn't have TV shows. They had serialization books. The
yeah.
books came out chapter by chapter on in like a newspaper, and that's what the Count of Monte Cristo is. So actually, maybe the way to get
The
just to do it for yourself is to write a chapter a week. Don't
I
write
mean,
a
because
whole thing.
that is essentially what they were doing. They were writing a
Yes.
chapter and then releasing it to get published in the local newspaper or whatever. They weren't writing the whole manuscript and then the whole thing is done and then releasing
Yes.
it en masse.
Right.
They would have gone poor because
Right.
for how long it takes to do that, and especially back then. But so yeah, I mean, you're right. That's exactly what they were doing. It was, um, here's a here's 5 pages, here's a
Yeah.
chapter, here's a whatever, and and there you go. So
It also explains why things like the Count of Monte Cristo are so long, because, as I just said, the flashback sequence takes 3 chapters. And frankly, if you were writing today, you would have an editor on your ass being like, cut that down. And it makes sense in some ways. Like, yeah, actually, you probably, I mean, like, again, the first version of the Count of Monte Cristo I ever read was an abridged version. So you definitely
yeah,
could cut it down if you chose to. But it's fun reading the full version and getting all of this juiciness
the
out of it.
the enrichment of the entire tale and getting
Yeah.
really immersed in it. Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree, and it's something that I
Right.
feel like is wholly missing from movies, television, even contemporary books of the day. Everything is very, to the point. There's
Uh-huh.
not a lot of meandering around to a certain degree. There's not a lot of, overarching plots and stuff anymore. It's all very much a straight path. Like they don't want to confuse you with too much potentially complex thinking. So
Right.
yeah, I get
Yeah.
it. Sucks,
The
but
only
yeah.
other thing to really talk about at the moment, um, there's a show on Netflix right now called Death by Lightning, which I've seen the first. There's 4 episodes total. I've seen 2 episodes, so I still want to watch the last two. But it's the telling of the president Garfield, how Garfield became president, the 20th president, shortly 16 years after Lincoln. So it's after the Civil War. It's the story of how he was became president because not only did he become president, he was assassinated. He was one of the presidents that was assassinated. So the president after Lincoln that got assassinated was Garfield by a former supporter in this case. So the show Death by Lightning tells the story both of Garfield, who became president, and he became president in a unique way. The Republican Party couldn't pick a candidate; they were in a lot of infighting, and they kept trying to vote on a candidate, and they couldn't pick one. And Garfield had gotten up early on in the process and had given a speech that had been very popular, and so he became the consensus candidate, the guy that everyone agreed, okay, we can't, we're all disagreeing about who to pick, so let's agree to pick someone else. And he became the choice. He became president, and then I think it's 5 months later, 7 months later, 7 months later, one of the guys who had There was the crazy. He's just this crazy guy, this swindler type. He ends up killing him, and he took like a whole month, I think, to actually die. He got shot,
Mhm.
but the doctor that was caring for him did not do a good job. He didn't believe in germ theory. Germ theory was becoming a thing. Sterilize your instruments. This guy was like, no, I don't believe in all that. And that apparently is what actually ends up killing him more than anything else, is the terrible care he actually got from the doctor who ended up being his primary physician. But I haven't gotten to that part yet. I've just read up on the story. But yeah, that's a good show. It has Michael Shannon as Garfield, and McFadden. I can't remember the name of the guy. He played Mr. Darcy in the Pride and Prejudice film with back in 2005, and he's playing the crazy guy who ends up shooting Garfield. So anyway, that's a fun show to watch. And then Stranger Things is having its final season right now. I have not watched the final season yet. They got 4 episodes, I think, the night before Thanksgiving. But I want to rewatch the whole show. So starting tomorrow, I'm gonna finish up Death by Lightning and then try and kind of binge all of Stranger Things. So we'll see how that goes.
I don't know if I'm gonna watch the finale of Stranger Things. I know I didn't watch season 4, um, at all. I think the last I didn't even think I finished season 3, as a matter of fact. I don't know, like, I kinda got to a point where I was really annoyed with everybody in that cast because it's something that they do for pretty much any new project. They get really excited about the actors and the team and the close-knit crew and all this stuff, and then you start seeing them all pushed out into multiple products and projects, and they're just everywhere.
Yeah,
And I mean, I on the one hand,
oversaturated. Yeah.
right, I get it. You're trying to build these their careers, building their resumes, getting them out there. I do. I get all that. But then it just like it crossed over to me from a point of they're the hot new thing to I don't know, it's just like we were supposed to care too much about, who they're with, who they're, what movies they're in, TV shows, who they're dating, who they're not dating, rumors and speculation. I just I hate all of that. And I always have. And so to suddenly find myself being like having to hear the same thing about literal kids. They were what, 10 years old when the show first started.
Yep.
And I know the show's had its various breaks and hiatuses for whatever reasons, and they've done other projects, so they can't film anything. So I know that even though they're only on season 5, these kids have been acting and doing stuff for the better part of a decade.
Yeah.
So they're older than what they are, supposed to be on the show. Which again, I don't have any problem with. I would rather you keep the original actors than try to you know,
Recasts. Yeah.
yeah, whatever, and keep it, and then also keep it going. So I get it, but so much emphasis placed on who's, you know, political stuff with them, and uh, uh, again, the dating thing, and who's being mentored versus who's being groomed, and who's being coached, and who's in what product, and just all of it. I can't stand any of it. So like the more I heard about those things, the less I wanted to watch the shows.
Right.
And I just realized like so much of our, you know, um, like watchability of things often does get tied to stuff. Oh, you can't watch that because he cheated on his wife, and while they were divorcing, he was shacked up with his co-star, and they were, you know, doing whatever, and they've got 2 kids and whatever. I always fall back on my same rule, which is as long as everyone is legal, everyone is consenting, and no one is harming anyone else, I don't care. Sure, morally, should that person have been fully divorced before pursuing another relationship with some other person? Sure, sure, they should have, whatever. But
Keep the
again,
tabloids out of my movies.
right, exactly. I just don't care.
Yeah.
And it makes me not want to see your project when I've been saturated with all of their behind the scenes goings on, you know? And I know that that can also make me seem a little bit of a hypocrite, because then there are certain people who, when I find out that they have done certain things, I don't want to have anything to do with them. Period. It's like whoop, too, and I think that's part of it. It's, oh well, now that I know that you are a, yeah, I don't know, habitual offender of whatever it is that you do. You're a raging alcoholic behind the scenes. I don't want to, you know, so it's again, it just becomes too much. And so
Mhm.
I just want to leave it alone. And there's so much of that with these kids, with not just with the kids, with the writers, the production teams, the just all of them. There's just so much. And I just
Mhm.
got really burned out on it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to be in that ever.
Right.
So it might be a little bit. Maybe once it's all finally finished,
Yeah.
maybe I'll go back and I'll watch it. But as it stands right now, I have zero interest.
Right.
Um, for me, this week has been, relatively calm despite the holiday, which, happy Thanksgiving belated, by the way,
Yeah.
to
You
everybody
too.
and so forth. But, I had some family that came down from Kentucky and from DC. We got to visit with them. That was nice. It wasn't overly, long or drawn out or anything like that. I got to do some baking, which I haven't done in quite a while. So that was nice sharing that with my kid, going through that process. So, we enjoyed that. But then I also spent a lot of time doing like my favorite thing, which is rewatching old 90s movies and imagining if one, the movie could be, done today, and then two, who would you cast to do it? So the movie that I watched over Thanksgiving, the two actually was 48 Hours and Another 48 Hours, which are great movies starring Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy. If you've never seen them, you should definitely watch them.
Okay.
As soon as you watch them, you'll see why they're classics. It's got all of the cliches, and my favorite part of it is 48 Hours, which is the first one, was filmed in the latter half of the 80s, right? So it was right before Eddie Murphy became Eddie
Truly
Murphy.
big. Okay.
Right. So that one. But then when they did another 48 hours, that one's like 92, 93. So it's like right there at Eddie Murphy's, like he's the man. So to watch how they have to like adjust the movie for star power, it's very clear what they were doing here. And
Huh.
it's kind of the Terminator switch, right? So in the first Terminator movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a nobody. And
Right.
so him being the bad guy was fine. But by the time Terminator 2 came around, good old T2 came around, his star power had changed significantly. And so now he couldn't just be the bad guy. They had to reinvent the wheel a little bit for him. So it's kind of the same thing here with Eddie Murphy in these movies. So we may talk about that later because obviously we've got a lot to talk about tonight.
Hmm.
But yeah, if you want to know who I would recast and what my plot of the next 48 hours movie and also in my breakdown, it would not be a new, like we would not be doing a reboot. It would just be called yet another 48 hours. So that's that's what we'd be doing. And that's how I would keep the franchise alive. We would just keep playing on that joke of 48 hours. So I've worked it all out from actors to plot to how we keep the 40 hours theme going. All of it. I did this over Thanksgiving. So
Nice.
clearly I had a lot of time on my hands. I also spent some time watching a show called Landman on Paramount.
Oh, is that the one with keep going, keep talking.
Um,
It's got
it's another Taylor Sheridan project, which he's got a lot of. I mean, the man, they should just rename it, Sheridanville instead of Paramount because he's got so many shows. And, I realized I've watched several of them. I never saw Yellowstone, but I watched all the ones that were around Yellowstone, like the 1888 or 1868 it was called.
Mhm.
And then there was 1923. I watched Lawman, Bass Reeves. I've watched, and now I've watched Landman, and and Lioness is another one that's his. And I'm realizing he's really good at fixing you in his worlds that he builds. He's really good at immersing you in so much um, like real data, real time information that it makes the rest of the story that he tells incredibly believable. So that's one thing I will definitely give him credit for. But the downside to that, I feel like, is it's very easy to pinpoint when he's telling something that's fact versus when he's making up the rest of it. I don't, in my opinion, again, you can just take this as whatever you want to, take it. He has not figured out the proper way to blend those two things together. There's a stark cutoff. And I pick up on it almost every time, and it's in every episode. It's in, and it's not to say that the aspects of the realism or that he has in there aren't great. They are, but I feel like that's probably the only failing of the show is where suddenly these people are getting away with things or coming up with things that no way that would go down that way.
Right.
It's just legally not possible. Stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Gotcha.
So, but it's still very entertaining, and if you don't think about it too hard, probably not a problem for you. So,
Right.
still great stuff to watch. And again, Paramount's just like sign over all their rights to this man because he's now got like a bajillion shows on their network, and I mean they must be very thankful for him because he's bringing in all kinds of viewers.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But we're not here to talk about all that. We are here to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and we have a lot to talk about. And in fact, we are going to kick it off with the season 5, episode 10, Rapture. This was a great episode. It brought us Cassidy back. We got to see some more of ancient Bajor, and we got to see the prophets kind of do some crazy stuff to
Yeah.
Ben as well. So real quick now, because we got a lot to cover, and we're down 20 minutes. Remind me again, what did you think of this episode? I know we talked a bit, the Cassidy Yates thing and everything else, but what were your thoughts here?
Well, this is finally the moment where Ben embraces the idea that he's the emissary, um, which is interesting because I mean this is season 5. Like he's been the emissary for 5 seasons, and now he's finally on board with the idea. So I mean, it's just interesting to think like modern shows would just expedite that process so much more quickly. We don't have
Yeah,
time to wait for him to get on board with it. We need to go. you know.
that's
Uh,
very true. In most typical TV shows today, if they ever were to have a character like this, he would be uncomfortable with his, assumed role for maybe half a season.
right.
Then after that, it's like you're gonna have to like pull out all his teeth before he lets it go,
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, this is season 5 now, and he's finally really kind of not just settled into the role, but he's really enjoying that he's the
Well,
emissary.
I mean, let's just think about it real quick. Like, if you were to cast a show, if you were to compare most shows since then, and then like having him be the emissary, it would be a season 1 arc. Season 1 arc
Oh
is
yeah,
he's the emissary, but he doesn't like it. But the end of season 1, he's
he's
on
comfortable.
board.
He's
Yeah,
in it. He's in
and
the
I'm
position. Yeah,
and to use your favorite show of Battlestar Galactica as a comparison, like what's the Balthazar? What's his name?
Baltar, Gaius Baltar.
Gaius Baltar. I mean, how many ups and downs and positions and I mean that man has been everything from the president to a prophet to
It's
you know
true.
like that
To
man
just
just
regular,
whatever he needs to
he was he
survive.
he was council man. He was just advisor at one point. He's vice president. He is the president. He's just a regular doctor. He's scientist extraordinaire. Yeah, it's just he was everything.
Right.
He was whatever they needed him to be as they told their story. But the best part of that is they did give reasons for it.
Oh sure.
You know,
Yeah. I'm
they
just
were good
saying
at
that
that.
Cisco would have been like more quickly on board with the whole emissary thing if we were to
Oh yeah.
if we were to do the show today. Um, yeah, and it's just a interesting idea too that no, don't join the Federation. Uh, Bajor needs to stand alone, and then that later turns out to be actually wise because the founders basically treat Bajor as neutral territory, if I remember
Mhm.
correctly, during the upcoming war. They try and have the Cardassians kind of beat, that threaten you need to join us, but even when they take over the station, it's a we're neutral. Even Bajor is
Yeah.
still overall neutral in this
Yeah.
conflict.
They
Yeah,
they honor they honor their armistice. They honor the treaty, and they may push certain things on the edges, but for the most part, they did honor it. So yeah, great decision by Cisco, and it's also one that um, he gets credit for from the Bajorans. It's what saves his job with the Federation anyway. As far as Starfleet's concerned, he failed at his mission. The Bajorans were getting ready to sign and become full-fledged members, and
Right.
because of him, they didn't.
Right.
And that was his whole reason that they sent him there. So they were ready to kick him out and put him at another posting, but the Bajorans were like, "Yeah, no, you
Right.
can't." You
Right.
know, and it's one of those things too that kind of brings back the fact that in Starfleet, this whole him being a religious icon um, is really a colossal failure on Starfleet's part. As soon as they got wind that the Bajorans were looking at him this way, they should have had him reassigned. They should have just instantly taken him out of there, because that's like definitely against the mission statement, charter, credo, whatever you want to call it, of Starfleet. They don't really we don't they don't put themselves into a position of influence over another race's culture, people, anything like that. That's not what they do. And so for him to come in and not only be an influencer, but he's like the man. Like even the Kai has no say or
Hmm.
sway over the
Right.
emissary.
Yeah.
So suddenly, with such a massive following on his hands, that's every grounds to have him reassigned to the
Yeah.
furthest. Like if you can't stop the Bajorans from saying he's the emissary, but you can certainly remove him entirely from that
Right.
sector of space and just be like, you've got two choices. You can either stay an officer or you can be the emissary. You
Yeah.
can't be both. But
It's
they
interesting.
allowed it.
It's an interesting question in the sense of like the prime directive. Like obviously the Bajorans are a advanced enough species that they can join the Federation and etc. But what does happen if a Federation officer becomes somehow tied in to a culture and a race and that's not part of the Federation? It is an interesting kind of
Mhm. Where is this violating, your uh, first contact directive?
yeah. Hmm.
At what point are we stepping over the line? Now, I do feel like we get a little bit of a caveat here because the aliens that have selected Ben as their emissary are real. It's
Yeah.
not that he went to Bajor and they said, "You are the one that's prophesied," and bestowed upon him this thing. He met actual aliens in the wormhole who were like,
Right.
"We're not going to deal with anybody else but him." So,
Right.
and the Federation's all about other, meeting
Oh,
other species and
yeah. Where
that
they at? Where they're
exchange,
at? Yeah.
right? And since these are very powerful beings, and you would want to be on their good graces,
Right.
and yeah, so I mean that's kind of where I'm like, that's how they probably worked up giving Ben a pass here. But otherwise, yeah, we're
Yeah.
sending you like what Bajor's here. Okay, you're going way over there. Like just
Yeah.
yeah, it'll
It's an
take you
interesting
a year
point.
to get back.
It's an interesting point because we're gonna talk about the Maquis a little bit, but that's what the problem with Eddington and what's Cal Hudson, right? Is that his name?
Yeah.
His Cisco's friend. Like, if they had known how involved those two were gonna get, they'd have been like, "All right, boys, you're heading out to this sector. You're not staying there where the Maquis are a problem." Um,
Yeah, I'm gonna say that Starfleet's biggest flaw is oversight. By the time they get wind of actual problems with their officers, it's already far too late. They are far too embedded. They're way too close to these individuals, and they don't have a way of stopping them. And by the time they muster up a crew or a ship to go out there and try to figure out a reason, it's always way too late. And then it's just like, what do we do here? And so much of Starfleet's good graces depends upon having people with extreme moral fiber in positions of authority
right.
that they cannot be swayed to the other side.
Right.
And yeah, it's very rare that we see that. Now, again, this episode also has us seeing Cassidy Yates again. This is 6 months after she went away. She goes with Ben where they find the lost city. And I know that you were always on the fence about their relationship. Did this episode help you at all with their relationship?
From what I remember of it, not necessarily. Yeah, I'll say this now while I'm thinking about it. I haven't watched the Orville, but I do see clips of it on YouTube because, of course, I get a lot of
Yes.
Star Trek clips, and so the Orville gets thrown in there pretty regularly. I do feel like whatever character she's playing, she's like a science officer.
She's
I
the
do,
doctor.
or the doctor, yeah. I
She's
do feel like
chief doctor. Mhm.
she fits there better, actually, as an actress and as her character. I always feel like, and let me put it this way, as one of the episodes here on Deep Space Nine early on, I think it's like season one. Dax tells Bashir like relationships are hard in the Federation. That's just always been true in my experience in watching. Well, I've only watched TNG and now Deep Space Nine. I just feel like it's always been hard, and I can understand why it would be because you're. I mean, it's like any sort of officer, any sort of military. You're being, you know, military kids are always talking about how they grew up on multiple military bases across the world, and it's got to be
Mhm.
rough as all get out. So marriages too has got to be hard. So I totally get it. I just feel like Cassidy Yates. Like I'll put it this way: I wish I would have liked a character for Ben to have been a little more stationary than some character who's off running her own ship around. Like I don't know, some character that could be a little more there. I mean, people might hate me for
Well,
saying this, but a little more feminine in that, she's not some captain of some freighter going around, but someone who maybe she's a Bajoran, she's on the station more regularly, she's someone he interacts with, and he has a chance to be more normal around. Like, let me put it this way: it's awkward that he has authority over her in some ways as the captain of the station when she's a ship freighter captain of her in her own right.
well, his authority over her only extended so far as to like health and safety matters. He couldn't
Yeah,
like
yeah,
order her to go anywhere. She worked for the Bajoran government,
right. I
and
totally understand. I'm not saying he has like 100% authority or anything. I'm just saying the fact that there is any sort of authority kind of conflict there at all, because I mean he does pull at least one or two strings for her. At like I think it's in later seasons, right? Isn't it season seven during the war at its height? He pulls a string and she gets wind of it, gets mad and says, "Unpull that string," and she.
yeah, he tries to get her. I mean, it was effectively a promotion, but it would have stopped her from having to make ship runs.
Right, exactly.
And she didn't want that.
Right,
But yeah. So, but I mean, that in their own way, that's something that we've seen in a lot of shows where there is someone with a little bit more influence than the other partner who thinks they're doing a good deed by saying, "Hey, I'm going to not only give you a promotion, but I'm going to relieve perceived stress with this move that I can make because I know so and so." But then
right.
it turns out to not be good because the person was actually enjoying the thing, even though they complained about it, they enjoyed the thing, whatever. So I mean, we've seen that before. Um I understand what you're saying though about like maybe having her be a bit more um available to Ben, being around more. I
Right.
wouldn't necessarily change her character, but I would have done more to showed their relationship was a bit more solid,
Yeah.
especially after the fact that she'd already been gone for 6 months with the smuggling charge and everything else. Now she's back, and even in like the subsequent episodes after this, we don't really see a whole lot of her. So
Right.
even if it was just like her in passing, or we see, like the episode could be about someone else, but they need Cisco's approval for something, so they go to his quarters and Cassidy's in the background, or they run into Cassidy and Ben um in the replimat having breakfast or something. Like
Right.
something to show that she was still doing things. Now, for us, the audience, to help with the immersive world, that would be great. But realistically, for an actress who is, still very busy, showing up to put on all the makeup and the costuming just to hang around in the background of a couple of scenes on the one off occasion they may, want to do a background scene is crazy.
Oh
And
yeah.
so,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
that's why that, and with these budgets being so tight as they were, that was never going to happen. Now, if, as we like to do, say we were doing this show now, that would be like, especially for something that is requiring such a lived-in feel like a space station, so certain faces are not going to change. Once you're established as a part of that group, be it because you're a girlfriend or a spouse or a child or whatever, yeah, the need for you to be there is gonna be written into your contract. So you
Yeah,
either accept that or we're gonna have to put someone else in the role who can accept it. That's just all
right.
there is to
Yeah,
that. But now, I know we may have more to say, but I'm going to keep us
yeah. We gotta
moving
get moving.
along because we've got other episodes to cover here, of course. After Rapture, we got into what?
The Begotten is where Odo
Gets
interacts
his
with
powers
Infinite
back.
Changeling.
Yes,
Yep. And that's a good episode because he gets to interact with the man who was the scientist who also raised him. And it gives him a chance to kind of reconcile his relationship with that man because he feels like he was kind of used and abused a bit. But I forget who's the scientist that raised
Doctor Mora,
Dr.
Doctor
Mora.
Mora
Dr.
Paul.
Mora basically is like, I'm sorry, I treated you more as a thing than as a person, and now that I know who you are, I want to. He's allowed to be more of a father figure and apologize. Their relationship is reconciled. It still goes through some bumps in this episode, but it's a good episode for that reason. Odo is a flawed character, not because of his. He's more flawed because of his loneliness than anything else. And this is an episode where he gets to address some of his loneliness and gain his powers back, which is nice. I feel like him losing his powers was more of a gimmick than anything else, frankly. I mean, they don't have him use his powers very often. It was for budgetary reasons, it would seem.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the fact that he gets back, great, but is what it
Well,
is.
so I like episodes that deal with this kind of interpersonal development, especially with characters like Odo, because they are total mysteries. Dealing with humans, we kind of already know our cultural traumas and baggage that we're going to carry with us, into any storyline. We've gotten a lot of that with some of these other characters, Bajorans, we know their cultural trauma, right? But Odo is a complete unknown, and trying to figure him out, we're just now starting to get the pieces of that puzzle. We saw the Things Past episode. Now we get this one. This is dealing with a more recent and far more personal aspect of the character of Odo and the reconciliation with his, for lack of a better term, father.
Mhm.
So, and we also get to see Odo become a parent in his own right, with the raising of the baby changeling and taking care of it, and the heartbreaking failure that leads to, which is also kind of the ultimate redemption, right? Because Odo has been punished by his people, he's had his powers taken away, he's totally shunned. And as he learns to kind of forgive Mora and also forgive himself, he's, rehabilitated. And this baby changeling gives him his abilities back. Um, what I want to know, because I don't think we ever talked about this, we know that Odo was infected with the disease thing
By now,
back in
true.
season. Yeah, that was in season like 3, 4, whatever it was. Season 4,
Yeah.
right? So then he goes to the Great Link where he is because he kills the one changeling. He's forced to go to the Great Link where they judge him and turn him humanoid.
Hmm.
So it can be inferred that it's at that point, because he hadn't gone back. It can be inferred at that point is when he infects them,
Right.
right?
I think
So
so.
then he finds this baby changeling, which he's able to determine is one of the 100 that we were told about in season 2 that were sent out among the cosmos, right?
Hmm.
And it's sick, and he helps cure it. So clearly it's sick from something else. It's not the virus of which he had been afflicted. Something
Right.
else has infected this thing. So then he gets his morphing abilities back, but then we see him later on become sick with
The
the
disease.
virus.
Hmm. Hmm.
So would that mean that he was reinfected? Because they turned him
Maybe.
human. They turned him human, right?
Yeah.
And then
They.
he gets his
Maybe we can.
powers back through the baby.
maybe we could say that they inadvertently caused his delay of the disease to affect him by making him human, by preventing him from being able to change at all. It kind of put the
That's
disease in like a
true.
dominant.
Like like a stasis mode because he wasn't
Yeah,
changing.
right. That'd be my theory. If we're gonna try and retcon a reason why, um, yeah, it somehow delayed the effectiveness of the disease overall, and that this changeling is just it's just a baby, but it's it never had a chance to finally develop, and for whatever reason, it's dying, and so the only thing that saves it is merging with Odo, um, which is possible as we've seen with the Great
Yeah.
Link. So that's basically what happens is that Odo merges with it, and it becomes part of him as opposed to being in any sense an individual anymore. But it's
Yeah.
just dying
Okay.
for whatever reason.
Okay. So, still interesting episode. I loved that Odo got his powers back here. And this is such an interesting way to do it. He didn't have to like go back to the Great Link and sit through some weird trial or anything like that. But we just, this very simple, straightforward story dealing with, kind of an overarching theme of forgiveness here, and it works.
Mhm.
After this, we have the For the Uniform episode. This is where Eddington rears his ugly head once again,
Right,
and Cisco finds out about it, and he's ready and eager to go after Eddington. But Starfleet's like, "Yeah, you're too close to this. We're gonna sick another ship and crew on him." He damages that crew, and Cisco takes it personally and
right,
decides, "I'm coming after him." Now, this is a very contentious episode. I'm not going to say controversial. I'm going to say contentious because people always say that Cisco committed a war crime in this episode by poisoning this planet,
right,
by poisoning a particular planet. And I will always defend this because if you watch the episode and actually pay attention to the dialogue, he is only following the same um, methodology that
the mark
um,
you're using?
the Maquis are using, yes, and he just balanced it out. If you remember in the episode, Eddington and the Maquis got their hands on some material that would render a planet poisonous to Cardassians, not to humans, but to Cardassians, and they used it. So they effectively kicked all of the Cardassians off of that planet.
Right,
They couldn't live there anymore. So Cisco retaliated by doing the same thing to another planet. He rendered the planet impossible for
for them,
humans to live on.
right,
So basically, they got a planet swap. You
right,
killed this one for the Cardassians, we killed this one for the humans. You had ample warning, ample time to get your people off the planet. It wasn't like you had a population in the billions on the planet. You were a couple of loose settlements of maybe 100 people. You
right,
had more than enough time to get everyone off the planet,
right,
and then y'all could just exchange, wave at each other in the window as you pass by and
right,
go to your other settlements.
right,
That's what he did. But
right,
every time this episode comes up, people want to scream, "Oh, that's a war crime. That's a war crime." It's not. He didn't kill anybody unless you were stupid enough to stay. He gave you, I think he gives them 2 or 3 hours to get out,
right.
you know? And he
Yeah,
didn't stop a single ship. He didn't fire on them. He didn't tractor them. Nothing.
right,
He just said, "You've got 2 hours, and
right.
then you won't be able to live there." That's it.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the question becomes of is tit for tat a legitimate moral claim? Eye for an eye. Um, I would say that the whole. Well, I'll say this: in the Bible, the eye for eye uh, Old Testament rule was supposed to actually keep you from overdoing it. And if someone knocked out your eye, you're not allowed to knock out two eyes of the other person and that kind of thing. If you're gonna retaliate, it has to be for
Proportional response is what I've always heard
exactly
from a military standpoint.
right.
Proportional response. What is a proportional response? I feel like what
Speaking of
Cisco did
which,
here is probably the precise, the
yes,
precise measurement of proportional response. You poison the planet. I poisoned the planet. He
Right,
didn't poison the planet and kill everyone. He just
right,
poisoned the planet.
right. By the way, you said proportionate response and reminded me of a fantastic episode from The West Wing.
I knew
And
you were
that
gonna say
is
the
the
West Wing. I
question.
wasn't gonna. I didn't want to bring it up myself, but I knew you were gonna
Yes.
say it.
That's
And
like a
I,
season one episode too, if I
yes,
remember
it
correctly.
is. It's a
Yeah,
great episode.
yeah.
Situation
They
Room.
they
Yeah.
blow up something. We shoot a silo. They do this. We blow up a
What
building.
is the
What?
merit of a proportional response? That is what
Right.
Bartlett is screaming over and
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah. What?
Love that scene.
Maybe I want a disproportionate response. Yeah. That's actually yeah, it's a great episode. That's like episode 2 or 3. That is really early
Real,
on.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Another
yeah. So I
another 90s show that you should go back and absolutely watch. I'm telling you, that was like peak television.
yeah.
All those shows, and they were competing with each other. West Wing, ER, like all these things were on and competing for the Emmys, everything else. And if you're a fan at all, go back, go on YouTube, and you can watch those early Emmys that were taped. And seriously, like in almost every category, those shows popped up for like 7 years
Mhm.
consistently. It's crazy.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I remember this one being. I mean, I'll use the word controversial when we talk about it in terms of my recollection of it. I guess in part, maybe it's. I'll say it this way: because the bombing of the planets is done off screen. I didn't remember that Cisco was doing so in retaliation. I just remember that he had done something that was pretty
So
drastic.
Eddington's bombing of the planets was off screen. We saw
Correct.
Ben's on screen.
Well, that's what I'm saying then, is that
Yes.
Cisco does the thing and it's
Yeah.
very, oh my gosh. Um, but here's the really curious thing about the whole Maquis situation. The whole idea of the Maquis is they are a group of people who said, we don't like the Federation's treaty for this area. They abandoned us to ourselves and we kind of, told them to get lost because they weren't protecting us. So we're going to do what we need to do to protect ourselves. Um, do you disagree with that assessment?
Only slightly.
Sure. Go ahead.
Because well, basically what happened was it was kind of like open season out there. The
Right.
Federation had no jurisdiction because no one had jurisdiction. These people
The
went
Wild West.
way,
Yeah.
yeah, they went way out beyond anything that was even considered Federation borders. And then a war started in a totally different sector, which then just kind of swept across the area between the Cardassians and the Federation.
Right.
Then when the war ends and the treaties are signed and things like that, they said we want a buffer zone in between our respective spaces.
Right.
No proliferation or military buildup whatsoever allowed within the zone. And so it was like, yeah, civilians can live here all you want,
Right.
but that's it. And
And
so
the Mar-
the problem becomes that the Cardassians did not honor their agreement.
right. And
The
the Marquis are like,
Cardassians,
hey, Federation, they're not obeying the agreement,
right?
and
And then the Federation was like, well, by the time
we
we
don't want
get
to
there,
we don't
by
want
the
to
time we get
escalate the
right,
problem.
we don't want to escalate it, but also by the time we get there, there's no evidence of it. And
Right.
so we can't definitively prove that they're violating it beyond what you say. And we don't want to escalate it. So unless something clear happens, we can't step in here. And then the Maquis sprung up because it's like, well, okay, you're not going to step in. They show up and murder a bunch of us because they know that you're not coming. We've
Right.
got to defend ourselves somehow. And
Yeah.
they started to defend themselves, and the Cardassians were like, "Well, wait a minute."
Yeah. The
Suddenly,
Cardassians.
they were really good at defending themselves. I'm like, "Wait a minute, you weren't supposed to fight back." And then
Well,
they start screaming at the Federation, "Hey, get your people under control!" Yeah,
what's so
that's what
interesting about the
happens.
Maquis is that the Cardassians are subversively disobeying the treaty. The Maquis, in response, overtly disobey the treaty, which then allows the Cardassians to then say, well, then blah. And the Federation is in this weird space of being like, we're supposed to be honoring this treaty, but you're saying the Cardassians are breaking it. You guys are openly breaking it. So
Hmm.
like, we need you guys to stop openly breaking it. And the Maquis are like, well, they're subversively breaking it. It's
Yeah,
like it's this great little.
yeah,
It's actually a beautiful gray zone
yeah.
conflict that
Exactly,
they
and
bring up.
that's what we see play out in several episodes of Next Generation, and Voyager brings it up. We obviously see it here, and that's why where Cal Hudson was sent to kind of give Starfleet a facts on the ground assessment of
Hmm.
what's happening. And unfortunately, as Cal brings up, he's like, "Well, I'm trying here, but Starfleet sent me without any kind of tools or backup or any way to make any true meaningful negotiations with either the Cardassians or the settlers here. I
Right.
am watching as people that I'm trying to work with, they're there 1 minute and then the next, they don't show up to the meeting because a bunch of Cardassians swooped in and blew up their home. So
Right.
it's just like I can't make headway because the ones or twos that I do make headway with are killed, or
Right.
they do something terrible and then I can't deal with them. So yeah, it was a like that in and of itself could almost be the focus of its own show, but they
Yeah.
never really went that route. And then of course we get
Well, the
what
Maquis
happens
were
to them
always
later.
treated as like a kind of an introduction to the whole Bajoran Cardassian issue, as like a side conflict. If you compare how they like the Cardassians are introduced in part with the Maquis, but that's also being introduced in order to introduce the Bajorans and Deep Space Nine. So yeah, if they had decided to do more with the Maquis, it sounds like they really could have. But whenever they do bring up the Maquis, those are always good episodes, interesting good episodes.
I'll tell you,
Yeah,
I have more of an appreciation for the Maquis now than I ever did when I was watching the show growing up. And it's just because you want to think that people would never want to leave what Starfleet is offering. And to find people who do, and whatever their reasons for it, it just sounds, so ridiculous.
yeah,
And even to the point where, like, in the TNG episode where they talk about the Maquis, Picard says to them, "Look, we will take you away from here. This is a troubled area.
right,
We will round all of your people up, and we will put you somewhere else. You can
right,
choose even where to go."
right,
But they make a good point. It's like, well, I mean, you say it's a good spot, but who's to say in 50 or 100 years or whatever there's not going to be another war somewhere else that's going to make you draw another buffer zone that's going to take away that home even.
right,
Like, we're looking for true permanence here, and the only way we're going to get it is if we win it. We really
right.
earn it. And that's like the Maquis' whole thing. Now, of course, we know the Maquis get wiped out, unfortunately, but there it is.
Well, there's also that episode of the Native American group. They're like, we got moved around each and every place we ever went. We want to, we're gonna stay here and deal with the Cardassians because they were on the Cardassian side of the border, and we're gonna put up with them, even if we have to, endure them instead of the Federation or whatever. But yeah, yeah, this whole the Cardassians are so interesting as villains because, as I think you said, it's just Gul Dukat is the epitome of it. Like they have this inferiority complex. They have to prove themselves, and this is a perfect example of it. Of they could be allies. There's nothing about them that's like inherently unlike any other species
No.
necessarily. But
So
they, yeah,
what always fascinates me about the Cardassians is like you really do have to watch like all the shows to pick up on it. But Next Generation, when we first see the Cardassians introduced, they're this massive military power, but in the episode where Picard is tortured, the infamous "There are four lights,"
uh-huh.
the guy torturing him tells this interesting story about Cardassia and about how they were very much like a lot of the other, contemporary species. They, had art and culture and literature and all this stuff. And then one day they were hit by a famine, a terrible,
Mm,
terrible famine, and it wiped out so many in their population. And he even tells a story of being a small child who had to fight and almost kill other children just to eat spoiled eggs. And it wasn't until the military finally stepped in and began, severe crackdowns on a lot of things that the Cardassians really kind of just cut away at all the superfluous things
mhm.
and really focused on what would keep them secure.
Right.
And he tells the story and he ends it with talking about his granddaughter. He's like, now my granddaughter, she will never grow up and know hunger. She will go to bed every night with a full stomach. And Picard retorts, she may have a full belly, but her soul will be empty, because they've gotten rid of all these things. And so then you move on to Deep Space Nine and we hear more of that. Ducat says it. Leggett, what was his name? The one that was Kira's so-called father. He
Oh, right.
talks also about how they have the arts and everything else, that the military has done so much to strip all that away, and anything that's not in service to the military machine can get you thrown in jail or even just outright executed. And they live in this fear of the Obsidian Order coming and taking you away, and all this stuff. And so it's like, yeah, we've got power, we've got all this stuff, but they have nothing else.
Right.
And it's like, that's why, and this is where Ducat comes in. He talks about the Bajorans, and he's like, they were like children. They were these weird farmers, these spiritual people. They were wasting away in this land with all this stuff, but they weren't doing anything. If we hadn't come in and, turned them around, they would have been nothing without us. That's how he talks about them.
Right.
And so it's just like, when you compare them then to other cultures like humans or even Romulans and Ferengi and so forth, they all maintained those things to a certain degree. They didn't have to give up their soul, as Picard would basically sum it up and say,
Right.
in order to become any kind of military or paramilitary power. The Cardassians did, and that fear that they are going to be eclipsed is what keeps them making bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. And
Yeah.
they get in bed with the Dominion, who ultimately end up, instead of being their saviors, almost wipe them out.
Yeah. They blow up several cities. Yeah. In that final couple, like the final episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it's an interesting idea though that yeah, the something about the Cardassian past caused some sort of tragedy, the famine, and the military is what they needed to save them. They've overcorrected. The military is now causing the problems that they have,
hmm
and they actually need to break away from that. Um, yeah,
It's
that's
kind of a it's kind of a cautionary tale. It's like you can't have one without the other. Like, a military is absolutely necessary, but you can't let your military take away from the soul of your people. You can't stop the free exchange of ideas. Again, the Cardassians, another example, that Professor Natima Lang and her students who were on the run in the
mhm,
first season because they were just talking about
mhm,
ideas that were different from the government, from having a military government.
right,
You can't oppress people in that manner and expect your regime to last long.
right.
And so we've actually, from season 1, if you think about it, we've been watching the decline of the Cardassian people this whole time.
Hmm. Yeah,
So, yeah, great little breadcrumbs they've sprinkled in, which we start to see when you kind of do look backs like this. And it's like, yeah, oh, yeah, they've been doing this for a while. They've been on the decline for a while. And people like Ducat rise up when you have someone who believes that the heyday can be, you know, recaptured if you're harder and more ruthless and you make terrible deals with the devil. And it doesn't happen that way. It never happens that way. You're still defeated. It's just worse.
right. Yeah, I'd forgotten that story you told about the growing the famine, that the guy tells Picard. But yeah, that explains a whole lot of what
Mhm.
it explains their judicial system that we see at the end of season one. I think it is where
Yeah,
O'Brien is it season one or season two where O'Brien is taken.
I think it's season 2
Okay,
is where
season two
O'Brien is
then.
taken,
Yeah.
and there's whole guilty until proven innocent.
Well, I think the trial is just there to provide the evidence of why you're guilty,
Yeah,
not
they were already ready to execute, and they're just like, we're just going to list out the reasons why here.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can see how that's exactly how a military would do it. Like, we don't got time to give you a defense. No, we're
and,
gonna
and
give
we're
just
not
we're gonna
doing any.
present the
Yeah,
reasons why
no
you're gonna be
investigation.
executed.
Yeah, no investigations, no
Yeah,
questioning. No, we already know you're guilty. Here's why. Accept it. Die. Move on.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's this whole show. There's so many things you could say it's about, but that's also one of them, is that you have these people who were in decline and were fearful of that decline, and the failure of the occupation is kind of like the crown jewel in their decline. They
Mhm.
held these people in oppressive control for 50 years,
Right.
And even after 50 years, they still couldn't totally stomp out that Bajoran rebellious spirit. You
Right.
know, they couldn't totally put their thumb on these people. And again, that's why Ducat, who kind of personifies that infuriation, are so compelling because that it explains his fascination with the station, why he wants it back, why he hates Cisco so much, why he's infatuated with Kira, to lack of another term for it, like why he's so willing to do what Kai Wynn, Adame, whatever you want to call her, why he's willing to go with her. All of that plays in the fact that he just wanted that control again. That was going to put the Cardassians back on top, put him
Right.
back on top once again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know we're an hour in and we've only got like 5
Yeah,
episodes in.
I
I don't care how long it takes us. We'll take our time as long as we need.
Well, we're gonna move on. We're gonna do the next two together, which is In Purgatory
Yeah.
Shadow and By Inferno's Light, because they are actually a two-parter. This is once again where
Mhm.
they just don't do the two-parter. This is where Worf and Garrick find themselves on that asteroid prison, and Worf is made to fight. Like, how many Jem'Hadar does he fight? I think he fights like a dozen.
Something.
Yeah, before he finally
He
has
has
to
to hit
hit
the
the boss Jem'Hadar. And this is where we find out that OG Martok is in the prison cell, and uh,
OG
OG
Bashir.
Bashir is there, and Abrin Tain is there. Um,
He was got. It was season 3 that he and the Obsidian Order tried
mhm.
to attack
and,
the
and we
founders.
didn't know what happened, and that's why Garrett joins this mission. He wanted to see if
Right.
there was anything left of the Obsidian Order, but in particular, Tain, and we find him. And yeah, they played this weird game with Worf called "We're Gonna Beat You Bloody." But if you can stand up and hit the little light cone over here, we'll keep going. And he does, and he ends up beating. Yeah, I think it's a dozen. I'll go back and check that, but I think he defeats a full, like during the time that he was there, a full dozen Jem'Hadar by
Mhm.
himself before he reaches the final battle, which he's so beaten and broken, there was no way he was going to win it. They weren't giving him a chance to heal up and be back in peak form every time. Uh, I think there's even a day where he fought like at least five nonstop. They never took him out of
Mhm.
the ring. So, yeah, I still maintain that had Worf been given ample rest and recovery time, he would have beat that other changeling. Or not changeling, but that other Jem'Hadar. He'd already beat a dozen of them. He wasn't about to go down, So
Yeah. And doesn't the lead one get killed by the Vorta because or did you just say that like
yeah, so
yeah.
so at the
Yeah.
end of it, because Worf refuses to surrender. And so the Jem'Hadar yields, even though all the
Right.
fights to the death, the Jem'Hadar yields, and he says, "I cannot beat this Klingon. I can only kill him, and that no longer holds my interest." And the Vorta is like disgusted with this display of honor, and he's like, "Shoot them both." And at that precise moment, Garrick flips the switch, and
That's
they're
what it
all
was.
beamed out. But the Jem'Hadar, of course, with no transporter lock, is killed. So
Right. Yeah. Um the Dr. Bashir being revealed as a changeling. How I don't know if we
we've
really ever
we've
how far back was
tried.
that
Yeah, we've tried based upon the uniform and what Julian says in the episode, and as far as I can tell, it had to have been season 4. It had to have
yeah.
been season 4 because in this episode, Julian
Oh, no, I'm
says,
sorry. It's episode 4. It's Nor the Battle to the
yeah, that's the
Strong.
one I was thinking of. Julian says
Okay.
that he was on his way to.
That's season 5. But
Okay.
yeah, go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
in
Yeah.
that episode, Julian says he was on his, or in this episode, in Purgatory Shadow, Julian says he was on his way to a medical conference and he never made it. He woke up and he was in his cell. In that episode, Nor the Battle to the Strong, we see
Mm,
Jake and Bashir returning from a medical conference. So that means that uh, something happened once they were there that he never got to experience.
right. Ah,
Yeah, odd convolution of time, and then that leads right into By Inferno's Light because sorry, I was off camera there for a second, but it leads into it because they get back on their shuttle and are heading back to the station to alert everyone that Bashir is the changeling. Meanwhile, in By Inferno's Light, there's been suspicious activities going on the station, little bits of sabotage here and there. When they finally get the message about Bashir and they're able to stop him, he was attempting to blow up the Bajoran's son, and they were able to
hmm
stop him before he was able to complete his mission.
right. Interesting idea that the changelings would be willing to sacrifice themselves like this, because this Doctor Bashir, this changeling Bashir, was going to sacrifice himself to do this mission, and ends up dying in his own explosion. Um, I'm not saying that that's impossible. It's just curious that in this case, that's the route this changeling chose.
They
You'd
seem to
think,
be all about suicide missions. You remember the episode where they had the whole reason they went back to Earth? They get that video footage of the explosion at the conference or whatever, and the
oh
changeling
yeah,
is the vase in the background. Presumably, he died in the explosion.
yeah,
They
yeah.
seem that they are all about no changelings harming one another, but they've got nothing on suicide.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, what's more dangerous, more frightening than an enemy willing to kill themselves to accomplish their objectives? So maybe it's a scare tactic or something. Maybe if
It's a
you're a
crazy tactic.
changeling who's done something that the group doesn't like, Odo got you can't do your changeling abilities anymore, but the others, all right, you're still one of us because you're still a changeling, but your punishment is you have to go infiltrate the enemy and commit some sort of self-destructive act that inspires fear. I don't know. That's like their version of of punishment. That's a way out there theory, so don't take me for serious
Did
or
we
anything.
did we ever was Laws the changeling that we saw who turned herself into a flame?
Flame. When was this?
That's why I'm thinking it was Laws, the changeling that came to the station
That's in season
was.
7, right?
Yeah, I'm just wondering um if a changeling could ever be a flame because it just brings up questions as to if they can change into energy because maybe those changelings were not
Killed in that
destroyed
way.
in those
Hmm.
explosions because they were able to just change into energy and it's not a problem. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look up what laws can do or not. Anyway, moving on. We will.
Oh, Dr. Bashir, I presume. Okay.
Yes. So this is the episode where we find out that good old Doc Bashir is genetically engineered, genetically enhanced.
Yes.
He is. We get to see his parents. And this is all because Dr. Lewis Zimmerman, the famed hollow scientist, has decided that a new emergency medical program will be modeled after the brilliant young doctor. And he's come to ask him a bunch of personal questions in order to give the emergency medical hologram um, a better personality because the first version, which was based on Dr. Zimmerman, did not perform too well. Now, it's important to note that by this time, Voyager was up and running as a show. And so that emergency medical holographic program, more colloquially known as EMH Mark One or the Doctor, is working on Voyager. So if you want to see all the arrogant assholeness of Lewis Zimmerman, but as a doctor, go watch Voyager. Pretty much, and that's kind of the point they were making in this episode. That EMH had personality flaws. They wanted somebody more personable, and here comes our doctor. Um, Everything seems to be going along just fine. Julian is hesitant to do it. No one can really understand why he's so hesitant to do it until his parents arrive, and his parents spill the beans that he is genetically enhanced, and it turns out that Julian was a stupid child, developmentally stunted in some regard, and his parents paid to have him basically redone. And he became not only normal, but like super genius,
Right.
and not only super genius, but massive boost to his reflexes and to all these other things about him. And he struggled with having to, rein it in and be normal in some ways. Otherwise, it could tip people off that he was special.
Right.
And his parents go to jail, don't they?
Yeah. Yep. And part of confessing what happened, his father in particular,
Yeah, I
I
think
think
that's right. The father
was
goes
it
to jail. The father takes the sentence. The mother stays out of prison.
that sounds right. That's the father that agrees to go. But yeah, this episode is so interesting because it brings up the whole idea, which you had me watch that episode from the show, Strange New Worlds, which is one of the more new shows, but it also brought up the whole question of you know um, genetic engineering. Maybe it was a later episode you had me watch for that reason. Actually, now that I think about it, but anyway, the idea that genetic engineering in the Star
Yes,
Trek
no,
universe,
I did watch make you watch the Strange New Worlds episode about that. The
yeah,
Illyrians. Ad Astra per Aspera.
right. It's such an interesting idea because, as Star Trek fans will know, um, Khan, what is his name? Sadiq
Khan
Khan?
Noonien Singh.
Khan Noonien Singh. He and his people were genetically modified people, and that was a result of the genetic wars on Earth, right?
World War III came about because of massive power struggles and, yes, experiments with genetic engineering, which led to several, you know, warlord despot leaders who were all genetically modified.
Excuse me. That's a part of time in Star Trek history that really
Hmm.
would love. I mean, I'm sure someone's explored it in like a book,
Oh yeah, it's
but
been covered in a lot of books actually. There's this, that gap of time which after World War III and then before First Contact, all that has been covered a few times with altered timelines and all kinds of stuff that talk about it. And some of them are pretty awful. Like when there's a colonel in particular who kind of leads the charge on the genetic manipulation, Colonel Green,
mhm,
and he wipes out like some 10 million people and takes over the southern Asian continent or something like that. He does and sets up shop there, and that's where Khan and his like are made.
okay,
And then right before the downfall of Green, he rounds up his best subjects and puts them in basically sleep chambers, cryonic sleep chambers, and launches them into space, where they're wholly forgotten about until Kirk finds them.
right.
Some years
That's where
later.
Khan, the guy group stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea that you could genetically modify someone not like at birth or before birth, but like as Bashir here is, like when they're 7 or 8.
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea. And I like that. That's actually something that like that's a problem. Like that's Star Trek basically comes to the point of like if you allow only a certain number of people to engage in this, then they're gonna, become superior to their other people, and they're gonna consider themselves a unique race, and therefore susceptible to superiority complexes and
Yes.
abuses, and
This
um,
was this was what was the main fear when we started the Human Genome Project all those years ago, was that by being able to fully and successfully map the human genome, we'd be able to pinpoint these areas, not just that are problems, like, oh, here's a potential cancer marker, let's pull that or whatever, but also, oh, here's the marker for intelligence, we're going to enhance that. Here's the one for strength or dexterity or whatever. We're gonna, flip these on or
right,
multiply them or whatever. That was what that was all about. And so this episode is talking about kind of the outgrowth of that technology and fear, and how
right,
if you know the right people and have the right money, then like you were saying, yeah, you could suddenly have whole generations of genetically engineered children, placing normal people outside of any kind of access. And
right,
it's still an interesting conversation because it's something that we are exploring today. We
right,
do have doctors that are like, hey, we see a potential for cancer here. We can edit this,
right,
CRISPR editing and all that kind of stuff is becoming more and more of a talked about issue. So
right.
yeah.
And I know we probably mentioned at the time, but the movie Gattaca deals on
Yes.
this. Yep, that's a great movie. Um, yeah, yeah. The idea of I just like that idea. I hadn't really ever thought about it much. Well, I guess like with the movie Gattaca, I thought of it in some ways, but like I guess Star Trek takes it to the next level of like, yeah, military, societies based on genetically modified people, and how that could bring about societal, not just societal breakdown, but societal collapse and actual
Mhm.
war. Um,
Because as Starfleet, Star Trek, not just Starfleet, but as Star Trek points out through the tales of Dr. Bashir, Khan, and so forth, it's like you said, there becomes this subset within them that makes them think that they are truly superior. And with that mindset of superiority comes this thought of we must oppress those who are not like us,
right.
and
Or
that's how
manipulate at the
wars
very
start.
least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's how wars start, and that's how you know which is the end result of World War III, which is massive population decimation, a fundamental lack of resources and supplies, scatterings of, radiological waste and whatever else. I mean, if you watch the movie First Contact, you're looking at a post-apocalyptic horror here.
Right.
These people have been brought to the brink.
Right.
And, this new technology, if it works, could be their salvation. No
Right.
way to know. They're still living in fear of another aerial assault. When First Contact, when they get to that point when the Borg arrive in the past and start shooting at the planet's surface, Lily Sloan freaks out, thinking that it's another
The
aerial
war
whatever,
coming again. Yeah.
from the war. So yeah, it's interesting that they always paint it that way, that this is the fallout from that,
Hmm.
and it isn't until and yeah, it wasn't until the Strange New Worlds episode that I had you watch that we actually saw a more positive take on genetic engineering.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff.
Now, yeah, it's a great episode. It's a great subject to talk about. There's, like you said, there's a lot of books on it, not just in the Star Trek universe, but a lot of sci-fi writers have dealt with this thought of being able to genetically engineer or even just genetically modify people, and that even that terminology, like genetic engineering, is for like um, during the points of conception. Genetic modification is all after birth stuff. So
Yeah.
found that out when I was doing some research a while back. Never mentioned it, but there you go. Moving on, we have the episode "Ties of Blood and Water." This is where
Hmm.
Kira's former Cardassian daddy,
Hmm.
who she was living with when they had her thinking that she was a Cardassian, he comes to the station to give basically his last rites. He's
Can we put a
dying.
pause real quick and just say, if Gold Dukat had been a part of that episode in any way, can you imagine? Either
I
he would
know.
have been, he would. I imagine he would have been very happy to see her as a Cardassian. There's a part of me though that would think that he'd actually be upset that, like, you've been a Cardassian this whole time, Kira. Gold Dukat would have been like, no, no, I want the Bajoran version, because he's always been obsessed with Bajorans. Um, but again, maybe if his initial reaction would have been some sort of pleasure. Kira, you're actually a Cardassian. You look like a Cardassian. You become a Cardassian.
I don't think that he would have enjoyed her the same way that he enjoys Bajoran her,
Oh, of course.
but I think that he would have gotten a new sense of enjoyment out of it, knowing that it was Kira and how much she hates Cardassians. So to be like, I think that he would have laughed hysterically if
Yeah.
this had turned out, if like he'd become aware of this at all. I
Right.
think he would have laughed hysterically
Yeah.
just to torture her more.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think there would have been oh well, now that you're one of us, let's hop off to the bedroom and make some pureblood children. I don't think that would have been
No,
would have
no.
been the thing. No, but I think that he definitely would have enjoyed torturing her
With the
with that.
knowledge of
Yeah.
some form. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah.
So he comes to the station to basically give the Cardassian version of last rites, which is ratting on everybody. And and he proceeds to tell her all kinds of things about
Mhm.
Cardassians and Cardassian politics and whatever else, and who to trust, who not to trust. And yeah, she's just like, okay. um she ends up getting into like a bit of a conflict of interest because she's doting on him so much, and she becomes very much aware that she's treating this man like her father, and she had such a horrible last, you know,
She has
bits with her
flashbacks
own
to her
father.
father dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
so she's feeling like she's betraying him, and then she kind of rediscovers her love for her father and respect for this man here,
Yes, and
and
mhm.
ultimately ends up burying him next to her father.
Yeah.
Finds a spot, and buries him. I thought it was a nice episode. It was the right kind of complicated without stepping into how are we going to investigate all these wild claims that he's
Right.
telling and everything else. It just became very much a personal family story. I'm looking at some stills. That's why I
Mhm.
keep turning my head to the side over here. I'm just looking at these pictures, and yeah, I really found it. I think it worked out well, and was the ending was touching, and I like how she kind of stuck it to Ducat at the end, because remember Ducat calls and he's like, "We want him back. Like, I
Right.
don't know what he's doing there. I don't know why he even left. Um, give him back to us." And she's like, "Yeah, that's not happening." And
Right.
then when he finally dies, Ducat calls again. Only this time he's talking to Cisco, and he's like, "Okay, we still want his remains. Can we have him?" Like, "I'm sorry, family members took him. We don't know where they went." And then here he is being buried with Kira. With Kira.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember this episode in particular because at the very end is when Kira is shedding tears. She's crying because she was upset because he reveals that he had been a part of some of the tragedies and some of the horrors that had happened on Bejor. Um, he claims that he was, lower down. He was just a peon. He wasn't actually in charge of things. That's comes into question. But Kira, like Nana Visitor, like does a great job of like crying as like if they gave her the tears, or I think she like sheds a tear. Just I don't know. I remember being not quite liking this episode, and then really really loving the acting that she gave us there at the end.
Yeah.
And I remember also you you and I had a little disagreement because she decides because she was angry at him, so she was not willing to like sit by him as he was dying, but she does at the last moment get there right as he dies. And I
Hmm.
remember being like, I'm glad that happened, but you had the more negative.
You
You
know,
like the
yes,
dark ending. You like the
I
idea
did.
of him being
I like.
dead before she gets there. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yes, and I will explain that again because we did talk about that, and to me, with the way that Deep Space Nine always tried to do these really bittersweet things with us, I would have loved this to be unresolved for both of them, because regardless of him having his, coming to the light moment later in life, he was still a legate in the Cardassian military. He did terrible, terrible things, and a lot of them to Bajoran people. And for Kira, who is, as she tells her own story, she's been a freedom fighter since she could pick up a phaser. She's been tramping through the woods and through deserts and jungles and everything else, fighting the Cardassian oppressor all her life. And for her to suddenly be all weepy and handholdy with this man who's murdered, countless thousands, maybe even millions of her people.
Mhm.
I just didn't like it. I would have liked them make this to where it's a bridge too far. You know, like we can see them both kind of walking up to it, but actually crossing that and making that connection. I didn't want to see that. I wanted to see them both kind of struggling and stunted here until the bitter end. And he doesn't get what he wants. He doesn't get the absolution and
Yeah,
the
absolution.
forgiveness
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
from her. I didn't want to see, and I wanted him to wrestle with that in his last moments, because that's fitting. You
Right,
are a terrible, terrible person. You should not get comfort in your last days. It's not you push someone down. You murdered millions.
yeah,
You should not get comfort in your last days. And for Kira, it was, you are trying to work your way through forgiving this man because somehow you've connected it to your father. You shouldn't have to do that. You need to figure out another way to absolve yourself of that anger you have for your father
right.
and work on that and
Because
not
the
use
story with her
this.
father was that he was he a coward? What
She
was it?
thought she thought he was a coward, but through the tale that she gives us, and I guess the remembering that she's doing, we see that he was not actually a coward. What he was doing was trying to protect her
Right,
family.
Right.
And
Right.
so she, as a kid and growing up, she thought it was cowardice, but now looking back and remembering more things, she's seeing that it wasn't that. And
Right.
so, and that's why she's so upset, is because she realizes all this time she carried this thought of her father forward that was not true. And
Right.
so she's got to figure out a way to get over that.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah, and I'll just say this again. We probably said it back at the time. I like the idea that there's a reconciliation between the Legate, Gamar, and Kira, in the sense that I believe in reconciliation and forgiveness and absolution as a religious concept. I totally understand what you're saying, though. Of like, yeah, maybe that's just a more realistic take on the story of like
yeah.
she would just
I
can't
just
quite get there or something, or he does need to suffer on some
Yeah, well,
emotional
I just
level.
feel like there are certain things you're not of a level to be qualified to forgive a person for. We
Right,
say that with a lot of religious tenets that forgiveness is kind of the ultimate goal of a lot of them. But at what point can we just kind of take a step back and say, look, I am neither competent nor qualified to offer you the kind of forgiveness that you're looking for.
right,
If you were a thief and you stole a car, you stole food, you did things like that. I mean, yeah, probably. We could talk about that, figure out some kind of common ground and move on from there. But mass murder, what kind of frame of reference am I supposed to have to be able to
right,
relate to a person like that, to even get to a point of being able to offer true forgiveness and absolution? At what point are we just paying lip service to this and really meaning it? And that is why I always have a question about it. And that's why I would prefer, when they get to situations like this, they leave it open. And it's up to
right,
us to determine, did the person deserve it and did they actually achieve it? It's one
right,
thing to, like, we can debate whether or not he deserved it, but leaving the question as to whether or not it was actually achieved, I think would be the best outcome, would be the best goal in a
right,
situation like that. And they didn't do that for us. They answered it for us.
right. Yeah,
I liked all of that. That was a nice exchange. Moving
yeah.
on. Moving on
Can we
from
even finish season 5?
we are gonna try, man. We are gonna try. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Frankie loves songs. Turns out that Moogie is actually now the secret. Uh,
Power behind the
she's
throne.
the power behind the throne of the Grand Nagus. Yeah,
That's all we need to say about that. Frankie
yeah.
episodes, they're
They're
fine.
very
Yeah,
strange.
they're
Yeah.
they're fine. But that's all we really needed to know there. We move
Yeah.
into
Mom, you're wearing clothes. Oh gosh, there's so many questions. Uh,
we move into Soldiers of the Empire. This is where what? Um, oh, this is the one where Martok is having a crisis, and
yeah.
people are they've the Rotara and his ship, they've lost their faith in him and his leadership. And also, is it Core? Yeah, it's Core, I believe, who comes on the mission. And
But Core's
no,
already
I'm
been.
sorry,
Oh,
I
his
was thinking
son.
of something else.
It's
That
it's
wasn't it.
Worf's son, right? Is it Worf's son? Or is that later? That's a
No,
later episode.
that's later. This is the one I was right originally. This is the one where Martok has suffered kind of a crisis of confidence because he was in that prison camp for so long. And so this is
Right.
his first back at command. And he is kind of taking seemingly wussy ways out. Strategically sound, yes, but not necessarily the Klingon way. He brings Worf on board to shore up the crew, but really because he's grown to trust Worf through their shared
Right.
experience. Jadzia comes along as well because, of course, she does, and she begins to help Worf see the true problem of the crew. Um, he brings this to Martok's attention, who dismisses it at first, but then ultimately he ends up challenging Martok, and they duel it out, which kind of
And let it
reignites.
kind of lets Martok
Yeah, lets Martok
feed
get
in. Yeah.
that Klingonness back into him again, and they're successful. And at the end of it, Martok honors Worf by uh, bringing him into his house. He lets him join the house of Martok.
This is where that happens.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So Good Klingon episode, nice robust Klingon episode. We don't have to talk much about this one either. It's pretty much straightforward there as to what they do. It's nice to see that the relationship between Worf and Martok has blossomed so much because Martok is such a likable character, and so it's great
Hmm.
to now see him as a good guy on our side, and a friend. Um,
Right.
we have the Children of Time episode next. This is where everybody on the Defiant, they were on their way home. Jadzia finds a strange planet emitting strange radiation. They go to investigate. They end up crash landing, and they meet their descendants. And so they find out
Yeah,
that if they,
that's a weird one.
yeah, when they try to leave, they'll be thrown back in time 300 years, which will then lead them to making said descendants. Um, Jadzia figures out a way to basically split the ship so that they're able to fulfill both prophecies or whatever it is. One ship will go back in time, one ship will continue on, or whatever. But then they figure out later on that's not going to work. The crew commits to going back in time, but something happens and they clear the anomaly, and everybody on the planet never existed. Turns out, fast, past, future Odo, whatever, he's the one who did it because throughout all of this, Kira was going to die, and he was in love with her and couldn't handle her dying, so he altered the course of the planet so that she, or the ship, so that she would live in the future. And this is where we find out that Kira, or no, that Odo had feelings for Kira. He tells her in this episode. So again, straightforward, nothing really doing with our overarching plot here.
Right.
Next one is Blaze of Glory. This is the return, the final entry in the Michael Eddington story. This
Right.
is where Eddington has been locked up now, and Deep Space Nine receives a coded message about a massive array of missiles that are on their way to detonate on the Cardassian homeworld. Only
Hmm.
the Maquis codes can stop the missiles, so they have to bring Eddington to stop them. And then it turns out it was all ultimately fake. It was just a message that meant that the Dominion and other Cardassian forces were closing in on the last of the rebel Maquis, which one of them happens to be his Eddington's wife. And
Hmm.
Cisco's able to save all of them, but Eddington dies. He's shot multiple times by the
Gemini.
Jemadar, and he dies. So there ends Michael Eddington.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of all these episodes are nothing until the end. Empok Nor, that's the one where they need some spare parts, so they go to Deep Space Nine Sisters station. Empok Nor, Garrick is
Garrett kind of
infected.
loses his
Yeah,
mind for a
gets
bit. Yeah.
infected with some kind of weird mutagen, which causes him to freak out and kill a bunch of people. And he ends up having to go one on one with O'Brien, who's able
Brian.
to calm him down. Then in the cards is the weirdest episode. This is a Jake and Nog episode where Jake wants to get his father something really special. He settles on this Willie Mays baseball card. And so he starts making all these various trades and stuff with the help of Nog to try to get said baseball card. They end up getting um, looped in with some weird dude for the something of orthodoxy, that weirdo who wanted to create a pod that would keep him alive forever, but he had to be properly stimulated to be alive. So it's like, were his cells happy enough or something? It was very weird.
Yeah.
Um, this is like it very much felt like one of those old 40s throwaway stories of sci-fi tales, incredible sci-fi tales, and they just kind of wove it into this other thing we had going on. So again, wholly, forgettable, not important episode at all. And then finally, for season 5, we come to um, Call to Arms. This
Hmm.
is, Rom and Lita are planning their marriage. Um, they ask Cisco to do the marrying. They're talking about a buildup of, weapons and stuff. They come up with the idea to put mines around
The
the
wormhole.
wormhole. The Cardassians find out about the mines, and they're basically like, "Yeah, we're not going to let you do that." And he's like, "Yeah, you can't stop us." Uh, but of course, they try. They're able to successfully launch the mines, but they lose Deep Space Nine in the process. All the Federation officers are evacuated, and the episode ends with Gul Dukat, Damar, and Weyoun and a bunch of Jem'Hadar coming onto the station, and
Yeah.
Dukat is very smug, very glad that he got the station back, and he goes into Cisco's
Of
office.
course he is.
Yeah, he goes into Cisco's office,
And
and the
the
baseball
baseball
is
was
sitting on the
left.
desk,
Yeah.
and he's like, "It's a message from Cisco that he'll be back." It's like, "Yeah, you bet your ass he'll be back." So again,
And then it's a 6 episode arc before they ever come back,
hmm
right?
hmm
Yeah.
it's a great episode. We got to see some great battle scenes here. We also got to see the Starfleet fleet at the end. You know, when they are all departing and they end up going to Starbase 375. All those ships are out there and everything like that. We hadn't seen a buildup of Starfleet ships like that since Wolf 359. So we know what happened there. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
so that's it. That is
Season
season 5.
5.
We did not even touch season 6. Um, but I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of fun along the way, of course.
Yeah.
But it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. We will make all of these recaps work. The episodes, obviously, as we said, even when we were doing these episodes and covering them, they got more detailed as we
Mhm.
went on. So there's so much that you can't miss.
Once the plot really started to lock in, yeah. Yeah, there were very few superfluous episodes as things continued forward. Yeah.
Well, so what's your final thoughts overall on season 5?
Yeah, it's interesting to think back on all the seasons because remembering what the major plot points are is interesting. Like in this one, the idea that the war finally starts. Like, we've been having watched season 6 and season 7, the war was so important for those seasons. That was so deep. But then to remember that at the beginning of this season, it was the beginning of this season, right? Where let me come back. So season episode 1, the Klingons attacked in season 4. It was the beginning of season 4 where yeah, that's right. The Klingons attacked at the beginning of season 4. Worf joined at the beginning of season 4 because they were worried about the Dominion starting to infiltrate the Alpha Quadrant. So it took technically 2 seasons before that plot line really came about. So it's 2 seasons of the infiltration of the Alpha Quadrant from the Dominion, and then 2 seasons of war. But it was a huge episode, The Way of the Warrior, parts 1 and 2, when the Klingon fleet arrives at Deep Space Nine and is attacking, and so it's crazy. It's the ups and downs of the plot, of the overall plot have come and gone. We're back to being friendly with the Klingons again, and they're going to help us fight this war with the Dominion, and the Cardassians now officially are. I mean, the Klingons weren't wrong to say that the Cardassians were a worrisome threat. The problem was is they went all by themselves and they treated it more as an expansion of the empire as opposed to a fight against the Dominion. Um, yeah, there's a lot of this season 5 is good. I don't know if you qualify if you vote on one season better than another. I mean, I
I
think one
mean,
season is better than another. Excuse me.
I always, I always say that season ones, while we can find very important things about them, they can almost be throwaways in their own right because they're so boring with where they have to establish certain things, but they're essential because if you skip them and you jump straight to season 2, yeah, there may be more action and more context, but you don't, or action and more, like scenery or whatever, but you don't have the context with which to understand everything because you missed out from season 1.
Right.
um Season threes are where I find you can have the most trouble because if you don't have your storyline really moving by season 3, it's almost guaranteed you're never going to find it. and
Right.
then you struggle with trying to maintain your story through seasons 4 and 5, and if you get into anything else after that. And I think that's why a lot of shows these days, they have stopped pushing for long runs like that.
Right.
Ending in a season 4, ending in a season 5 makes more sense financially than trying to string this thing along for 7, 8, 9 seasons if the story isn't there.
Right.
Unfortunately, we're also dealing with, truncated seasons now, only 10 episodes a season versus what, 24, 25 we got, here.
Hmm.
So it's even harder now, I think. But yeah, I mean, I would never say skip season 5. Never. I
Oh
think
yeah, no, no, no. Yeah,
we've come across a couple episodes that we were like, oh, they're not important, but they're still
yeah. I
great
don't feel like there were
episodes.
any bad episodes. Yeah, yeah.
No, no, yeah, they weren't bad. They just weren't important to the theme that we were building towards.
Right. Only Move Along Home truly gets the bad qualifier, I guess.
Oh, it's so bad it's good.
Can't believe you'd say that. Well, I guess we'll have to get to season 6 next week and then make season 7 its own thing, I guess. We were trying to
Yeah,
get through stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, oh well.
But yeah, we'll get there. And hopefully we can resume also getting things um out on the various podcast platforms. I've been working on it. I've done a couple of meetings. We've gone through the securities once again, trying to figure all this out. Hopefully, we've got it sorted, and this week we should start seeing things on streaming platforms again. Otherwise, just stay tuned here to our YouTube channel, of course, and you can find us and follow us. You can ask us any question that you like, and we can go on from there. But that's it. Until next time, guys, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.